I didn't expect much, just a seat near the back, maybe some punch. But when I walked into my brother's wedding and saw my nameplate next to the bathroom, something inside me cracked. Everyone else had champagne smiles and satin tables, but I was tucked away, like a mistake. I tried to laugh it off, pretend it didn't sting, but then I saw the gift table. My name. Gone. Replaced by "from the whole family." That's when I knew. This wasn't just a seating error. This was war disguised as a celebration, and for the first time, I decided I wouldn't stay quiet. The wedding venue looked like it had been pulled from a bridal magazine, chandeliers dripping in crystals, flowers in soft whites and blush pinks blooming on every table, and the gentle hum of string instruments filling the air. Everyone was dressed to perfection. Everyone looked like they belonged. I stepped in quietly, my heels clicking against the marble floor. My dress was modest, elegant but simple, pale blue, just enough to not draw attention. I didn't want to make waves. I wanted to show up, be polite, give my gift, maybe hug Brian and leave. But then someone whispered near the entrance. "Oh, she actually came." I turned instinctively. The woman, my aunt, maybe, quickly smiled and looked away, pretending it wasn't meant for me. I forced a smile in return, even as something in my stomach twisted. I kept walking, reminding myself, it's one evening. You've survived worse. Scanning the room for my name tag, I spotted the table list pinned near the bar. My finger slid down the alphabetized names, and my heart sank. Table 18. I blinked, checked again. That was right. Table 18 was tucked into the corner, next to the bathroom hallway, beside an old water dispenser that gurgled every few minutes. A single fake flower centerpiece sat limp in the middle. My place card rested crookedly by a stained linen napkin. I laughed under my breath. Of course! Before I could even process it, my mother appeared beside me like a ghost. "Oh, there you are," she said sweetly, brushing non-existent dust from my shoulder. "I hope the seating's okay. We thought you'd prefer somewhere a little cooler. You always did complain about being too hot at events." I nodded, swallowing my pride. "Right, cool air, thanks." She smiled, that tight smile I'd known since childhood, the one that meant, this is your place, accept it. Then she walked off without another word, her heels clacking confidently toward the center of the room, where the rest of the family laughed around Table 1. Table 1. I stood there a moment longer before forcing myself to sit. The chair wobbled slightly, as if protesting. From my vantage point, I could see the glamorous tables filled with cousins, old friends, family members I hadn't spoken to in years, all bathed in golden light. My corner flickered under the bathroom hallway lamp. I was sipping flat water from a paper cup when the next blow landed. Across the room, at the main table, surrounded by white roses and candlelight, sat my best friend. Former best friend? I wasn't sure anymore. Emma, wearing the champagne bridesmaid dress I'd been told didn't fit the palette, laughing with my mother, whispering something into Brian's ear. My chest tightened. We hadn't spoken in months, not since I asked her to grab coffee and she ghosted me. Now she was sitting up there like she'd always belonged, like I never existed. I looked away, focusing on my hands, trying to keep my breath even. I could leave. I hadn't even eaten yet. No one would notice, but something told me to stay. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see it, every second of it, for what it really was. An illusion. This wasn't a celebration. It was a performance, and I had been deliberately miscast. A server passed by and offered me a lukewarm roll. I smiled and declined. The music swelled again. Guests began finding their seats for the dinner service. Someone bumped my chair trying to get to the bathroom and muttered a rushed apology. I smiled again, always smiling. As I sat in silence watching the toasts begin from a distance, a thought crept in like poison. I wasn't just forgotten. I was deliberately placed here. I turned my head and saw my mother again, raising her glass, seated between Brian and Emma. Her face glowed with pride. She looked like a queen. And I, her firstborn, was sitting next to a hallway that reeked faintly of antiseptic and urinal cake. I folded my napkin neatly and placed it on the table. My gaze drifted again toward the gift table at the front, an ornate oak structure draped in silk, stacked with delicately wrapped boxes and cards. I spotted the one I had brought, a matte black box with gold ribbon. Expensive, thoughtful. Inside was a deed to a cabin upstate, a property I had poured my savings into for years. A legacy gift, a wedding present from me to them. Except, my card was missing. In its place was a generic one, with love from the family. My breath hitched. No one had even told me. They had taken my gift and erased my name. My hand curled around my clutch, nails digging into the fabric. The room spun for a moment, not from wine. I hadn't touched a drop, but from the sheer audacity of it. They didn't forget me. They removed me, and I was done pretending it didn't hurt. I used to think I was imagining it, that maybe I was too sensitive or dramatic or selfish, that maybe I really did make everything harder for everyone else. I used to think my memories were flawed, that maybe the warmth I craved had always been there. I just didn't know how to receive it. But standing in that ballroom, it was like time folded in on itself. The wedding slideshow was playing on the screen near the stage, guests clapping and laughing as childhood photos of Brian appeared in sequence, him in diapers, on a bike, at prom. Every image glowed with love and pride. I waited for the familiar snap of recognition. Maybe they'd include the photo of the three of us at Grandma's lake house, the summer I got into Yale, or the shot where I won first place in the state science fair. Nothing. Then it hit me. I wasn't in a single photo. No, wait. There I was, blurred in the background, holding a towel. Another, barely visible behind a tree, cropped just at the neck. And one more. Center stage, but a massive bouquet was perfectly positioned to obscure my face. The petals looked intentional. I blinked, my heart hammering. It couldn't be an accident. Not 3 times. I turned away from the screen, suddenly needing air. My steps took me toward the hallway, lined with enlarged family portraits mounted on easels. One after another, I saw Brian's milestones. Him with his Little League trophy, his graduation cap, him on vacation with Mom and Dad. But none of me. None with both of us. None with me alone. Just blank space. My mouth felt dry. The walls seemed to pulse. Then I heard it. "You're so brave to come, dear, after everything." An old woman, Aunt Ruth maybe, smiled kindly, placing a gentle hand on my forearm. I stared at her, unsure how to respond. "After everything?" She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret. "You know, what happened at the cabin last year, I heard things got heated." My heart dropped. The cabin, the one I had gifted, the one they pretended was from the family. I hadn't been there in almost a year, not since the fight. I forced a tight smile. "Right, thanks." She gave my arm a little pat, then shuffled off toward the dessert table, humming. I stood frozen, surrounded by curated joy that excluded me by design. My chest burned. I needed answers, or maybe just clarity. So I slipped into the corner where the AV system was set up and replayed the slideshow from the start, quietly, where no one noticed. As the images flashed by, I scanned them more closely. In one clip, taken from a dusty old camcorder, Brian was about 10. I was 12. We were in the backyard, Mom filming, her voice narrating. Brian held a plastic bat. I was laughing, holding a juice box. Without warning, he swung. The bat hit my arm hard. I flinched, stumbled. The camera shook. My voice cried out. Then Mom's voice. "Oh, Brian, that was just an accident, right, honey?" Brian nodded, smiling innocently. It was a joke. The clip ended there. I hadn't thought about that day in years. My arm had bruised for weeks, and when I cried to Dad, he said, "He didn't mean it. Don't overreact." At the time, I believed them. I always believed them. A familiar scent, jasmine and powder, wafted in. "You're digging through old wounds again, aren't you?" I turned sharply. My mother stood behind me, holding a half-empty flute of champagne. Her tone was light, almost amused, but her eyes were sharp. "You remember that silly bat thing? You cried for days, she said, sipping. Your father and I thought you'd never let it go. I stared at her, searching for some trace of regret. There was none. Why did you leave me out of everything? I asked quietly. Her smile thinned. You left yourself out, Natalie. Always off doing your own thing, your own life, your own struggles. We just assumed that's how you preferred it. I laughed, but it came out bitter. No, I said. You assumed I didn't need love, so you saved it all for him. She tilted her head. That's not fair. Neither is erasing your daughter from her own family. She blinked, her facade cracking just slightly. I think you're reading into things again, she said, turning to walk away. Don't ruin the day. I watched her disappear into the crowd, her sequined dress catching the light. I stood there a moment longer, the glow of the slideshow still illuminating forgotten corners of my past. Each frame, each omission, another stitch in the wound I'd carried all my life. This wasn't about one bad night. This was years, decades, of silent cuts and careful edits. I wasn't broken. I was erased. The speeches began after the main course. I had barely touched my plate, my appetite long dissolved into the acid pooling in my stomach. The room dimmed, the spotlight cast a soft glow over the stage, and the MC called Emma to the microphone. I hadn't realized she was giving a toast. Apparently, she was more than just a guest. She was family now. She took the mic with the grace of a seasoned speaker, her sequined dress shimmering as she smiled warmly at the crowd. I've known Brian for 10 years, she began, and I can honestly say he's like a brother to me. In fact, he's more of a brother than anyone I've ever had in my life. The room erupted in polite laughter and applause, but all I could hear was the ringing in my ears. I sat frozen, the edges of the world blurring, more than anyone ever had. I looked down, not trusting my face. Emma had been there through some of my hardest moments. She knew my story. Or at least, I thought she did. And now she was up there rewriting it like I never existed. A woman beside me leaned over, holding a flute of bubbly. Are you with the bride's side or the groom's? She asked casually. I blinked. Sorry? She gestured toward the head table. I just assumed you were with the bride's side. I heard the groom's family is small. I forced a tight smile. No, I'm the groom's sister. Her face flushed. Oh, I'm so sorry. Someone mentioned you weren't able to attend. I tilted my head. Who said that? She hesitated. The mother of the groom. She said you'd had conflicts, that you preferred to be left out of these things. Conflicts. Preferred to be left out. I wanted to scream. But instead, I laughed softly, empty and exhausted. Of course she did. I stood up, needing to breathe. The music swelled again as the cake was rolled out. Guests clapped as Brian and his new wife posed for photos, all smiles, flashes popping like fireworks. I slipped past the tables, making my way toward the side hallway where fewer eyes watched. That's when I saw her, my mother. She stood near the corner, partially hidden by a decorative pillar, clutching a crumpled envelope in one hand. Her nails tore slowly through the paper, not in anger, but with surgical precision. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was mine. She was tearing up my wedding invitation. Not from this wedding, from mine. The one I sent her a year ago, the one she declined to attend because Brian had a game that weekend, and you always plan things last minute, Natalie. I stepped back into the shadows before she could see me. My mouth was dry, heart pounding against my ribs. It all made sense now. This wasn't new. This was systematic. I stumbled into the nearest bathroom, locked the door, and let my body collapse against the cool tile wall. The silence hit like a wave. I stared at my reflection, and for a moment, I didn't recognize myself. Not the adult version, anyway. But I saw her, the little girl in me, maybe 7 years old, eyes wide with confusion, arms clutching a certificate from school, one she ran home to show off, only to be met with, "That's nice, but Brian made his own sandwich today." Her smile had died then, and now her eyes looked at me with the same disappointed ache. "What are you doing here?" she seemed to ask. I didn't have an answer. Tears blurred my vision. I wiped them away with the edge of my sleeve and stood up straighter. This wasn't weakness. This was clarity. I opened the bathroom door and walked directly to the gift table. My black and gold box still sat at the center, pristine, untouched. I picked it up without hesitation. A few guests glanced over. One raised a brow. I didn't stop. I slipped my fingers under the ribbon, peeling it open enough to find the card. Not my card. Not the one I had written, signed with a note about legacy and love. It was replaced with a printed one. To Brian and Eliza, from the whole family. My name was gone, erased. Again. I looked around the room, scanning for my mother. She was laughing at something, her hand resting casually on Emma's shoulder. Brian was posing with a glass of champagne, his smile wide, proud. None of them noticed. Or maybe they didn't care. I tucked the gift under my arm and walked calmly toward the exit. No scenes, no drama, just truth. And the truth was, I didn't belong here. The air outside felt cooler than it should have, sharp even, like it was slicing through layers of pretense that had clung to me all night. I walked toward the parking lot, the gift box still in my arms, my steps steady but echoing louder than I expected in the quiet. Behind me, murmurs began to rise, confused voices, disapproving glances, a wave of discomfort rippling through the celebration I had just disrupted. Then came the voice I knew would follow. "Natalie!" My mother. I didn't stop walking. "You selfish girl!" she snapped, her heels clacking faster now. "You just couldn't let him have his day, could you?" I turned, slowly, calmly. Guests nearby turned too, drawn to the sudden tension. "You just had to make it about you like always," she hissed. "You ruined your brother's wedding." I looked her straight in the eyes, not flinching, not blinking. "I didn't ruin anything," I said. "You did that years ago." She opened her mouth, ready to retaliate, but I raised my voice, not shouting, but loud enough for those watching to hear. "If this is what family looks like," I said, gesturing to the room behind her, "then I'd rather be alone." Silence fell, sharp and stunned. For a moment, no one moved. Even the string quartet inside seemed to pause mid-note. I expected to feel heat rise in my cheeks, expected tears to sting the corners of my eyes, but they didn't. Instead, I smiled. Not a spiteful smile, not one born of victory or bitterness, but the kind of smile that comes from clarity. I turned back toward my car and kept walking, the gift still pressed to my side like a reclaimed piece of dignity. No one followed, no one stopped me, and for the first time in a very long time, I didn't want them to. I sat in the car for a while before driving, watching the guests shuffle back inside. The music resumed. The world kept turning. But something had shifted, permanently, and not just inside that building, inside me. That night, when I got home, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts swirled too fast, too hot. I opened my laptop and wrote, not to anyone in particular, just to the void. I didn't write with the intention of exposing anyone. I didn't use names. I didn't rant. I simply told the story. How I grew up believing I had to earn love. How I stayed quiet when I was hurt. How I let others narrate my worth. And how, one day, I finally said enough. I posted it anonymously on a public blog platform, titled it The Bathroom Table, and closed the tab. I didn't check back until 3 days later. It had over 400,000 views. Comments flooded in. Strangers from all over the world sharing stories that mirrored mine. Siblings who were overlooked. Daughters erased. Sons silenced. They thanked me for saying what they couldn't, for being visible. It was overwhelming and humbling. Then came an email from a name I didn't recognize, a filmmaker. Indie. Small budget, big heart. She had read the post and felt it deeply. "Have you ever considered adapting this into a screenplay?" she asked, because I can already see the final scene. I stared at the screen, not quite believing what I was reading. I had no experience in film, no dreams of being a writer, but somehow this pain, my pain, was becoming something else. something that might help others feel seen, something that might finally make the silence mean something. Therapy came next, not because I was broken, but because I was finally ready to understand the shape of the wound. Week after week, I sat with a quiet, patient woman who asked gentle but precise questions. Together, we peeled back layers. Together, we named things I'd spent a lifetime avoiding: emotional neglect, gaslighting, scapegoating. And we rebuilt. Not the family I had lost, but the one I could choose. I started connecting with others from the blog. We formed a small online group. Scapegoats Anonymous, someone joked. But it stuck. We shared. We cried. We laughed. We healed. Not perfectly. Not linearly. But honestly. I didn't just walk away from the wedding. I walked into myself. The text came 3 days after the blog hit 1 million views. "Mom's not doing well," Brian wrote. "She's been crying nonstop. Please call her. She's not herself." I stared at the screen, unmoved. The message was short, casual even, as if this was just another family squabble, a small misunderstanding I should help fix, as if I owed them clarity, as if I owed them anything. I didn't respond. The next day, she went public. My mother, the woman who once refused to take a family photo if my dress didn't match the aesthetic, went live on Facebook. Hairstyled, lighting soft, background neatly curated with family photos that just happened to exclude me. She started with a tissue in hand, eyes already misty. The performance was flawless. "I don't usually speak about private matters," she said, her voice quivering, "but I've been unfairly painted as someone I'm not." Thousands tuned in. She cried about how hard motherhood was, how ungrateful children could twist memories, how some people were naturally difficult and never satisfied no matter how much love you give. My name was never mentioned, but it didn't have to be. I watched in silence, heart steady. It wasn't rage I felt, it was detachment, pure and clean. I was no longer inside the story she tried to script for me, but then something unexpected happened. In the comments, buried between emojis and generic sympathy, one message stood out. I was there. She's lying. It came from Aunt Lisa, my dad's sister, the black sheep of the family, the one who had always been too blunt, too dramatic, too much. She posted again. "I saw how she treated Natalie. This isn't forgetfulness, it's cruelty dressed up in manners." The live stream stuttered. My mother glanced at the screen, her lips tightening, but she kept going, kept crying. More comments followed, stories, incidents. Little things I hadn't even remembered. Moments when guests had witnessed slights, overheard dismissive words, seen me pushed aside and blamed. The live stream became a mirror she couldn't control. By the time she ended the broadcast, it wasn't sympathy she had gained. It was scrutiny. Later that week, a local paper picked up the story. A viral blog, a family implosion. They reached out to me for comment. I declined. I didn't need to add more. The silence was louder now. In the days that followed, I heard whispers of fallout. Some of the cousins stopped speaking to her. Old friends unfollowed. Even the church group she'd led for years started asking uncomfortable questions. Brian texted again. "Why are you letting this happen to her?" Letting? He still didn't get it. I didn't reply. Then came the letter. Not an email. Not a text. An envelope, handwritten, from my father. He had always been the quiet one, the man who sat through every injustice like it was weather, unpleasant but unchangeable. He never intervened, never protected, never punished. But now, in surprisingly neat cursive, he wrote, "I'm sorry I didn't do more. I saw things. I chose peace. But silence isn't peace. It's permission. You didn't deserve what you got, and I hope you find better." I read it twice, then folded it and placed it in a drawer. I didn't need his apology. Not anymore. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped seeking acknowledgement from people who had long abandoned me emotionally. Healing didn't require their permission. A few weeks later, I heard Brian's marriage had unraveled. Eliza had left. Rumors circulated. Something about controlling behavior. emotional manipulation, echoes, patterns. One friend told me Eliza had said, "He's too much like his mother." I wasn't surprised. Pain doesn't disappear. It passes down. Unless someone stops it. I didn't rejoice in their downfall. I didn't celebrate, but I did feel peace. A quiet, powerful kind of peace that didn't depend on revenge or approval or dramatic confrontation. It came from walking away and never looking back. The first episode dropped on a Tuesday. I remember because I couldn't sleep the night before, pacing around my apartment, checking the upload status every 15 minutes like the internet might change its mind. The podcast was called Scapegoat No More. Simple, honest, unapologetic. I didn't know what I expected, maybe a few dozen listens, maybe a handful of supportive comments. What I got instead was an avalanche. Thousands downloaded it in the first hour. By the end of the week, it charted in the top 20 for mental health podcasts. People wrote in, not just to say thank you, but to tell their own stories. A woman from Minnesota who hadn't spoken to her sister in 2 decades. A man in India who had been blamed for his brother's failures his entire life. A teenager in Germany trying to understand why she always felt like the outsider in her own home. They didn't need answers. They just needed someone to say, "I see you. I've been there too." I recorded more episodes. Interviews with therapists. Letters from survivors. My own reflections, sometimes raw and broken, sometimes firm and clear. It wasn't about being an expert. It was about being honest. A few months later, the TEDx invitation arrived. The subject: what is family when love comes with conditions? I hesitated at first. Speaking live on stage, with eyes watching and judging, it felt dangerously close to the old fear, the one that told me to stay small, stay quiet, stay acceptable. But I said yes. The day of the event, I stood behind the red circle on the stage, palms slightly damp, heartbeat steady. I looked out at the crowd, strangers, all of them, and began. I told them about the wedding, about the table by the bathroom, about the invisible erasures, the silent wounds, the applause that never came. I told them about taking my gift back, about walking away, about finding peace not in confrontation, but in choosing myself. I told them that sometimes survival isn't loud. Sometimes it's simply stepping out of the frame where you were never meant to be. When I finished, there was a beat of silence so pure it almost vibrated. Then came the sound. Applause, rising, echoing. Some people were on their feet, some were crying. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't shrinking beneath the noise. I was standing in it. The applause wasn't about revenge. It was about resonance. They didn't know my mother, or Brian, or the quiet violence of being forgotten, but they knew what it felt like to doubt your worth in the places that should have protected it. That was enough. Later that night, I sat in my apartment, feet tucked beneath me, a cup of tea cooling in my hand. The city hummed outside, a different kind of hum than before, one I was finally a part of. I had built a life from the ashes of another, but healing isn't just about looking backward. It's about choosing what comes next. That choice came to me in the form of a little girl. Her name was Ava, 7 years old. Big eyes, quiet voice, cautious heart. The adoption agency said she had been moved through 3 homes already. Too sensitive, they said, too anxious. I understood that. I remembered that. The first night she stayed in my home, she asked if she was allowed to leave the light on while she slept. I said, "Of course. You don't have to earn safety here. It's yours." We weren't perfect. We had our storms, but I never raised my voice just to feel big, and I never asked her to be smaller so I could manage her better. Years passed. I wrote a book, The Bathroom Table, Stories from the Other Side of the Family. It wasn't a tell-all. It was a tell-true, a mosaic of memory, insight, and the quiet revolution of walking away from what doesn't serve your soul. The book did well. I didn't expect it to. But sometimes, pain written honestly becomes a map for others. One morning, as I sipped coffee and watched Ava paint dinosaurs on the kitchen wall, with my full permission, I opened a letter that had arrived in pale blue stationery. It was from Emma. I hadn't heard from her since the wedding. Her words were careful, hesitant, But the message was clear. "I'm sorry," she wrote. "I was a coward. I saw what they did to you. I didn't speak up. I tried to stay close to your family because I thought it made me important. It didn't. You did. I miss you." I sat with the letter for a long while. Then I folded it gently, placed it in the same drawer as my father's. Forgiven, but not reopened. Some chapters deserve an ending. Not all deserve a sequel. That's the thing about healing. It doesn't mean inviting everyone back in. Sometimes it means knowing who can stay and being okay when most can't. That evening, as Ava curled next to me on the couch, she asked, "Did you have a mom?" I nodded. "Yes, I did." Was she nice? I thought for a moment. She tried in her own way, but sometimes trying isn't enough. Ava leaned her head against my arm. "You're enough." I looked down at her, this brave little soul with paint-stained fingers and a heart full of questions, and whispered, "So are you." The past hadn't vanished, but it no longer owned me, and that was everything.